Hi, I'm Sam Slater from Fund Calibre, and today I've been joined by Lesley Duncan, manager of the ASI UK Ethical Equity Fund. Thanks for joining us, Lesley.
Thank you for having me.
So there's been a lot going on in the world in recent months, and environmental, social and governance issues are really becoming headline news on a scale and with a consistency that I don't think we really had before. So perhaps we could start with you talking us through each of these themes in terms of investments, a brief roundup of the things that you're looking at in each area, please.
Yes, it's certainly been a really exciting time. I think the pandemic has brought ESG really to the forefront of investors' minds, and also I think companies' thought processes as well. So on the E side, if I break it down, first of all, on the environmental aspect, there's big debates going on around energy transition. We're also seeing companies talk about and investors asking about hydrogen as an alternative fuel process as well. Climate has really moved up the forefront because you've seen obviously the delay to COP26 and what implications does that have for a lot of those targets that have been set. And then finally, due to the pandemic, you're seeing less people travel. So what does that mean as well in terms of airlines, the carbon footprints and so forth? So that's, there's a lot going on the E side. On the S side, the social side, and this is really quite phenomenal. You've seen, obviously, the pandemic having huge implications for companies and their human capital management policies. What's happening to employees just now that are being furloughed? How are companies engaging with their employees? So one of the things that we've been discussing with companies is that we invest in are, how are you treating your employees? Are you engaging with them? Are you looking at things such as mental health? Really, really important. And then the other aspect is obviously there's a big diversity and inclusion agenda going on just now. So that's really, important now as well. Then finally, when you go on to the governance aspect, one of the things that we've seen through the pandemic has been around how boards' remuneration is what's happening there. You've had a lot of boards and also the exec level below the boards taking pay cuts. So that's something that we've been focusing on. Other things that we've been focusing on is, again, diversity and inclusion in terms of board structures. The gender piece is really picking up a pace as well. And then finally, we have been looking at how do companies do their audits through a pandemic? How do you audit a company? Again, that brings challenges. So we've been asking our investee companies, how do you do that? So there's huge amount of things going on, which is, as I say, the ESG agenda, has really risen during this very, difficult time.
And ASI conducts some investor research each year asking your clients what they're thinking about in terms of ESG. What did your latest survey reveal, and do you think there's going to be any lasting changes from the pandemic?
The current survey that we've just recently done, it's really, again, brought to the forefront the climate aspects and environmental aspects. They are really at the forefront of our investees' minds just now. That is what they're really thinking about. And I would say that we've seen a trend over the last few years where that has been picking up a pace, and it's really not abating at all.
And even the best research sometimes can't help avoiding some nasty surprises. And very recently we've had Boohoo come under fire because factories in its supply chain in Leicester had some very poor conditions for workers. What was your reaction to this news and the findings?
Well, obviously, we were invested in Boohoo, and we'd had a very active engagement policy with the company. And during that period of time, we had given the company a range of asks that we were expecting them to do, which were focusing on a lot of the issues that were brought to light by the media in the press reports that appeared. We challenged the company on the press reports. And I think the thing for us at that point in time that we found particularly disappointing was the speed of response that the company was having. And that led us to decide to divest of the name. Subsequently, the report has come out, and the report is very difficult reading. There's things that the company have been doing that we, in our wildest investor expectations, would never have thought would have happened. So in hindsight, we've made, I believe, the correct decision to divest the name. And we really hope that the management of Boohoo will take the recommendations in the paper forward and really start to address the issues that the business is facing.
2020 has just been a year of bad news, basically, hasn't it? So perhaps we could end with a nice positive story or two about a company or more that you've perhaps engaged with that have made some significant improvements in ESG this year.
Yeah, I think sort of the good news story for me would be that companies in general are embracing ESG. So we've had a lot of companies that we invest in coming to us at ASI and saying, what is it you want us to do? What should we be doing? How should we be reporting in this? What metrics should we be looking at? So I think you've got that sort of wider piece that's going on, that companies are now finally realising that ESG is important, and it's metrics that should be tied into management's KPIs, their remuneration, all of those things. But then if I go into specifically some of the things that we've been seeing, and these are holdings within the ASI UK Ethical Fund, at FeverTree, we have seen the appointment of a head of sustainability, which is really encouraging to see. You know, if you'd asked me that when the company IPO'd all those years ago, would that have happened? I never would have thought that. So that's really encouraging to see. Another company that we own, Aveva, which is a software company, they're talking about a lot more about diversity and inclusion. They're actually talking about how do they get women into the workforce, and in a very, I would say, traditionally male-dominated sector. So looking at how do they get women into engineering software positions. So there's a lot of things like that going on, which is really encouraging to see.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you'd like to find out more about the ASI UK Ethical Equity Fund, please go to fundcalibre.com.